The following program contains scenes and language of a frank and explicit nature. Discretion is advised.
Let's get those sillies out early because we have a somewhat serious episode today for you and you and you and you and you and you and you, not you and you. Hello, hey Van Tassel.
Hello.
How?
Buenos dias, Diane Clary.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias.
Go!
Go! Oh, rest in peace, Pele.
Oh, that's right. He just died.
He died today. Yeah. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Welcome.
We're mixing it up a little bit today. Mm-hmm. Today's a little bit more true crime focused, a little more sad. Yeah.
I'm gonna just get this out before we do this because I need.
Yeah.
People need to stop saying "welcome in." Okay, that's it. Go on.
Who says that?
People now, when you walk into like a fucking coffee shop or a store, welcome in. Welcome in. Fucking where?
First of all, welcome in it's bad English.
Yeah.
But like also, don't draw attention to me. I just want to come in and get my stuff. I'm happy that you know me. Right. I'm happy that you're here. Happy that I'm there. Going to buy some stuff. But like, don't
welcome
do that.
in.
What would be funny if every time you did that, you just turned and walked out. Like, bye. No thanks. No thank you. That's the new move. Nope. They do it. A big one is sushi restaurants. Yamasayo.
Yeah, that's Japanese. It's culture when you go to.
I understand that, place. But guess where we're not?
Yeah,
Japan.
That's true.
Learn the language, motherfucker. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
I'm glad we got that out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now let's get to the real stuff. So today we have a guest that we interviewed over Zoom, and it's kind of a collaboration episode with the girls from 50 States of Badness, Gina and Shannon, who have become sisters.
Mm-hmm. I love
just us gals, the four gals, you know, together again.
Yep, Golden Girls, I like to call us.
Yes, we are the gold. We're kind of the Silver Girls. Silver Girls. I like that. We said new podcast.
Ladies.
The Silver Girls. On the Rare Form Patreon, on one of the episodes, you and I were talking about whether people who have been through like traumatic events, whether it's murder or murder, basically, if you're attached to that or you've experienced it, are you interested in true crime? Right. And we kind of left it open, like would those people be into it or would it turn them off? Right. And one of our a very long time listener back in the Dark Matter days, Jenna commented on our Patreon that she works with someone named Melanie, whose her grandmother, Lucille, was murdered in the famous case called the Lego murders. Mm-hmm. And she said that she was very much into true crime. So Gina from 50 States of Madness, please follow them everywhere, saw that comment and knows Jenna very well over the years and basically reached out and put this episode today together where you and me and Gina and Shannon, we kind of all together were in the studio and we talked to the granddaughter of a woman who was murdered by a vicious, awful killer. Mm-hmm. And in the interview, we don't talk a whole lot of like real specifics about the crime, but you and I can give people a backstory of what happened. So what year was it? 91?
1991.
Okay.
And it was winter.
It was, yeah. And where was it?
It was in Idaho, Moscow, Idaho. Am I making that up?
No,
that's the new one.
That's the new murders.
Holiday, Idaho?
I thought it was Wisconsin. Wasn't it Wisconsin?
No.
Okay.
No. It was in
Ohio.
Utah.
Oh, was it? Utah? You're right. Salt Lake City, of course.
Utah.
Yeah, we know that.
Outside of Salt Lake City.
It was in Salt Lake City. And this old woman who was, what did they say, 70?
She was 78, and she lived alone because her husband had died 5 years prior from Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. She was a feisty go-getter, very religious, very kind of well-off. Had a nice home and a really good grandma and
seemingly a very kind, normal kind of older
had
Midwestern woman.
Do you want me to tell the story? She had taken her car.
We can say little details here.
She had taken her car in to get fixed, and a gentleman brought her home while her car was being fixed. Right? Yeah, he gave her a ride home before while her car was in the shop.
Yeah.
And this man then returned a couple days later with his wife and baby and son, who was 5, in the car. And she opened the door because she remembered him. And he said, I have my wife in the car. I just was driving by and wanted to make sure your car was running okay. Everything was cool.
And wanted you to meet my kids.
Yep. And she invited him in, and then he murdered her. And so
he excused himself at one point to
go to the bathroom,
and he started going through closets, or she walked up and found him either in a bedroom or a hallway.
She walked past. I can even see it. Like, she walked past, and the hallway was there. At the very end was the bathroom in her room, and she saw him walking out of her room, and she was this feisty woman. So she was like, I guess she said too, she was only like 5'1" or something. And she was like, what the hell are you doing in there? Shame on you, sort of thing.
And he attacked. He attacked, and our guest does explain the extent of the injuries, but just to catch you up, if you're going to be, I hate the word, but triggered by violent crime, maybe this isn't the episode for you.
Yeah.
Because this woman was pulverized by this guy.
And his wife.
And while his kids were downstairs playing.
Those
which
kids
is
were right there,
fucking insane. And
just imagine those kids were
kids were downstairs and he was upstairs. The kids didn't see it happen. They were away, but they were in the room. I mean, they were in the. not in the room. They were in the home.
I didn't know there was a. I don't think it was a 2-story one, but I think there was in a different part of the house. Like,
the kids didn't see it.
Yeah,
but that doesn't matter. They were at the scene of a crime.
Right.
But he like basically crushed her face and stomped on her chest and broke arms and really like rageful, really sad, tragic end to this woman's life. And he was eventually caught in which is why it's called the Lego murders.
Well, when Melanie,
that's the one we interviewed, Melanie Thomas.
And what's interesting is she wasn't a kid. She was 20. She was married, and but when her mother went to the house, there was a pillow over her head, her grandmother's head. So they assumed that it was somebody that she knew.
Yeah.
So for years, they thought that it was somebody that they knew, and that sucks because then you'll hear about it. But they thought it was someone in the family,
which is insane.
Yeah, and that wasn't the case. So they were all scared. So it took 23 years. And this guy obviously was taking his kids to these murders, and the last one that he got caught at.
So 7 years later, 7 years later, in 1998, he murdered somebody else in a similar way.
Yeah,
and that one I think he even sexually assaulted the older woman. I believe, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he did.
But the kids were there when that happened and saw it
both times. So anyway, he was arrested.
Wait a second.
What?
The first one, no. The first one, his kids saw it. Because the 5-year-old even said, after they found the thumbprint on the leg, he said, my mom took that vase and hit her over the head. And the very first one, that's why I'm saying that he was right there. They were there in the hallway. They were there by the front door. And there was a huge vase. And Melanie said when they called that kid, or they got his name, and he was in jail, and they asked him about it because it took his dad a while to confess. But when they asked the kid just to make sure that he was at the scene of the crime, he said, I remember it vividly. And my mother was there because remember the mom always said that she wasn't there. I remember her saying the mother was there.
I don't remember her saying that the kids witnessed it.
Yeah, that he saw the big vase because that's what hit Lucille in the back of the head was that vase, and his son said that his mom did it. Okay. Yeah, that's why.
So, regardless, this guy was convicted of a murder 7 years later, or he murdered someone 7 years later, went to jail for that, and then the Lego murders was a cold case multiple times.
Yeah.
And then in 2015, I believe, 16, 18, whatever, a few years ago, not long ago, they reopened the case with new DNA evidence, and they lifted a print off of a Lego piece that was in the home
Of
and
Lucille.
Of Lucille, and it matched who was then the 5-year-old son of the murderer. And now that 5-year-old son had grown up, and now he was also incarcerated.
Yeah, all those kids were.
The whole family got incarcerated, and your fingerprints don't change. So that's how they were able to. He was a suspect before, but knowing that his kids were in the house put him at the scene of the crime, which is all they needed to confront him. And eventually, he wasn't very forthcoming, but he admitted to it eventually. So we spoke to Melanie, who was very, very, very generous with her time to come and talk to us, and she was very, very open. I don't think there's nothing she wouldn't answer.
No.
She was very sweet, and she spoke very fondly about her grandmother. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, the second murder. What I found fascinating is that those kids helped drag that body. So of course,
the kid was now 12 years old. The older one was 12 now,
and the other one was, I don't know.
I mean, probably 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that, of course, those children are going to be
they're
in
doomed.
prison. You know what I mean?
Doomed.
Or jail, or like in and out of jail, or
like
whatever.
It makes you wonder, like in the prison system, how many people who are in jail who never had a chance.
Yep.
Like because of what you're exposed to and your opportunities and how the hand you're dealt, or just the horrible shit your parents do.
Yeah, because when they took away the kids, they all went to different foster homes too.
I hate to do it, but in the killer's defense, it was take your kids to murder day in Utah.
Too soon, Dan. Too soon.
I apologize. Maybe on that note, we should throw to the interview now.
We got the sillies out earlier.
Hopefully we'll do more of these collaborations with other podcasts, but especially the girls from 50 States of Madness.
They're the best.
Who are doing such a great job. And their show is great. Please follow them on YouTube, follow them on iTunes, and sign up for their Patreon. I know some of our supporters have been very generous and gone over there and helped them. And so this is a blast. It
was amazing.
Before we get, do you have any takeaways you want to share, or should we just get right to it?
From the
Melanie?
interview?
Yeah.
Well, you'll see. Like, I asked her a question that Jean
oh my
and I
God,
are fucking floored by.
That was wild.
Yeah, and it really makes you.
Spoiler alert. Heidi cries a little.
You cry.
But it was. I mean, all your cries are properly timed. This one made a lot of sense.
And then I felt like, oh God, like Melanie's like, and I'm like, ah! like, but I don't know. I thought it was really interesting because and the fact that the question was, when you are so close to a murder like that, how do you feel? Are you a fan of true crime? And
she gives an answer.
Yeah,
yep.
And I'm a huge fan of true crime, and obviously Gina and Shannon are too.
Yeah,
and you are as well.
Of course, absolutely.
So like this was really fun to do. Fun meaning not fun because it was so sad.
No, it was enlightening and it was fascinating.
Yeah,
and it's I don't know why we're so drawn to it, but tragedy and violence is something that I think people just want to know about.
Right. Well, especially the unknown. And for them, it was 23 fucking years of not knowing who did that. And how they felt afterwards.
And the fear sometimes of like, is he going to come back? Does he know where we are now?
Yeah, because if it's a family member who they thought, it was somebody that they knew.
But you get a chance. It's not, by the way, it's not all super heavy. There are some light moments, and it's more just like a very human interview, and just understanding the kind of fallout that comes from this kind of thing, the kind of positive lessons that you learn, and how important it is to kind of when you lose someone to look back at them fondly. Mm-hmm. Like I know when all my grandparents have died now, but none of my memories of them are the last time I saw them. It's never at their worst.
Right.
And it's important. I mean, in a murder, it's got to be really, really hard, because how do you not think about that? But you gotta try to think about the positive.
Like the she lit up a room thing. But but I saw this meme the other day, and it was a girl, and she was taking her own like videos of herself, like, and she's like, I'm taking these so people can show them at my funeral, because my husband never takes videos or photos of me. So it's her like laughing.
It's It's really
So you
good.
can, like, see
on
it
top of
in
the
the-
casket in the digital
Montage.
displays. Oh my God, that's great. We should do some of
Anyhow.
those. So I do want to thank Melanie Thomas again for being so open and willing to share, her family's basically worst moment ever and the
She's
effects of
great.
what happened. She was wonderful. She might be able to bring us some more people who want to talk about it. But Melanie, thank you so much for your time. And thank you to Gina and Shannon for putting this together.
Mm-hmm.
And without further ado, here is our Lego Murderers interview.
Hi.
Hi, good afternoon.
Welcome. Good
Yes.
afternoon. Welcome to 50 States of Madness and Rare Form Radio.
Awesome. Good to be here.
Yay!
So today we have a wonderful guest, Melanie Thomas. We're doing a collaboration podcast today with Rare Form Radio with Dan and Heidi. And we have a wonderful guest who we were introduced to by Jenna. She's a listener, been a longtime listener of Rare Form Radio. And she's also a listener of 50 States of Madness and one of my very good friends. And she works with Melanie. And Melanie was nice enough to join us today on our episode and give us some details and let us ask some questions. So go ahead, Melanie. Take it away.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you for doing this. We appreciate
Yeah, for your
this.
time. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know where you want me to start. Just telling a little bit about
Yeah.
my experience, maybe. Like, do you want like the when it happened, how we found out, all of that good stuff?
Absolutely.
I would love to know the day of, kind of how you found out. Walk us through your experience and reaction and who told you and that kind of thing.
Right. Well, the day that it happened, my mother, she worked really nearby to where my grandmother lived. And my grandmother had called her and told her that she had some milk and some eggs, some things that she needed, or she wanted my mother to pick up because, they go bad, those types of things. So she just had some things at the home for my mom to pick up. And my mother said she left work early, picked up some pizzas and picked up an extra pizza for my grandmother, and was driving and had intended on stopping at my grandmother's home. And, she remembered that she was late to pick up my sister at gymnastics. And so she thought, you know what, I better get to gymnastics, get this pizza home, and then I'll run over to my mom's or I'll call her and tell her I'll pick it up in the morning. So she actually drove right by my grandmother's road and headed home. And which, when we looked back at things, she would have been there right at the time that the murder was happening. And so she felt so much guilt for so many years.
Wow.
But when everything came out and we found the times and how and when and it had happened, we realized that she would have walked on. So, but so she went home. She called my grandmother over and over again and didn't get an answer. So she fell asleep, went to bed. And then the next morning, she, on her way to work, stopped over at my grandmother's home. So she said it was a cold morning. There was a little bit of snow, not a lot of snow, like footprints or anything like that, but it was cold. And my grandmother lived in a middle upper class area. So she was, I would consider her well-to-do, but she was somewhat well-to-do, or upper class. So she had a little bit of a driveway that went up that was secluded. She lived kind of up on a hill. So when my mother went, she walked up the stairs to go to my grandmother's front door, and she stepped on some Legos. And she thought that was kind of odd, but she didn't really think anything of it. She got up to the front door, and it was locked as usual. So she used her key to get in, and she went into the home and was calling out to my grandmother. She didn't answer. And then if you walk into the front door, my grandmother had a really, really heavy, and I remember it as very heavy, front glass door in front of the door. So it's a storm door. And that door would shut automatically and it would lock automatically. And it's interesting because my grandmother was very, she was just careful. She was very careful. She lived alone. My grandfather had passed away 2 years prior with Alzheimer's. And so she lived alone, and she was very cautious. So that door would lock automatically. And so she could open her door, see through the screen door or the storm door to see who was there and talk to him that way. So, but those doors were locked. So my mom used her key and entered the home. And pretty quickly, right, if this way is the family room or the living room, and then this way was a long hallway. And my grandmother was at the end of that long hallway. So my mother found her. She ran to her. She said that the first instinct she had is that maybe she had been hemorrhaging, is what my mother said. She didn't know, and had maybe run out of the bedroom with like a pillow, and then maybe had fallen. But from what I understand, it was very, very bloody. So there were blood spatters on the walls. There was blood, a lot of blood through the pillow, both sides. Anyway, so my mother called 911, was in a panic. We've listened to those 911 calls, and it's really, really hard to listen to, very hard. She was very, very distraught. And in the 911 calls, you'll hear, or we have heard, she mentions, what do I do? What do I do? And they ask her, they say, you need to give her CPR. And my mother says, she's passed. And they said, you need to give her CPR. And my mother said, well, there's a pillow over her head. And in that moment, you hear the 911 operator say, are you alone in the home?
Oh,
That gives me chills.
Oh,
Yes. And my mom said at that moment, she knew it was a murder. And so she just really, really scared. So she dropped the phone and she ran out of the home, and then just waited and in hysterics, and just, not knowing, and just, really, really, really difficult. For my mother, she said that the police came, and then they prevented her from reaching out or talking to anyone, because at that time she's the only one that's been there, been in the home. So she couldn't reach out to any of us, to my father, to any of us, and let us know it was happening. And it was hours and hours.
I mean, it's 1991, so it's pre-cell phones. It's pre-being able to reach out quickly.
It is. Yes, it is. It is pre all of that. Yeah. And so, I know that once she was able to call my father, she hello. And the first thing he did was yell at her, where are you? Where have you been? And so,
I have a good excuse.
yeah. But, that was just the beginning of just the chaos and the everything that went on in the family, the emotions, the feelings, the sadness, the confusion, all of that. But so really at that point, I remember where I was at the time. My husband, of course, pre-cell phone. So he was at home and I was working. I was a teller at the bank, and my husband called me and said that my grandmother had been murdered. And then, just in shock. I just remember being in shock. And then I proceeded to call my sisters and my brother. And
so you were already married at the time. So you must have been you were really young.
I was. And what's interesting is my husband and I were the exact same ages as the man who murdered her and his wife.
wow.
Oh my gosh.
The man who took her life was John Sanson. He was 23 and his wife was 20 or almost 21.
Almost. Wow.
Yeah. And so and they had a 5-year-old son, which is, and a baby. So,
and they were there when that happened. Correct?
They were, when we found
was she there as well?
The wife was there.
Yeah, the wife was there. Yeah, when we found everything out.
It was a family affair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew that about the second, with the one in Arizona, but I wasn't aware that the wife was there. I knew the son was there, but not the wife was there.
Right.
Wow.
When they originally got evidence and all of the things that they could, it's interesting because different family members are my sisters, my siblings, and I remember different bits and pieces.
Yeah.
I remember that they had stated that they did, it was a really, really brutal murder. Maybe I should backtrack a little bit and tell you how, I can tell you what he told us, or what we found out at the trial. But essentially what my mother walked into was my grandmother was really, really savagely just beaten to death. She was a tiny little lady. She was adorable. She was 4'11" and barely over 100 pounds. So just a little thing. Yeah. And it's interesting because just a couple days before she was murdered, I was speaking with her on the phone, and she said, I just got back from my doctor's appointment and I had a physical, and he says, I am so healthy that I'm going to live to be like 100. And she said, I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Were you in town at the time? Were you in the
Yes.
same? Oh, okay.
Yes. I was living in Utah, not far from where she was. We were all living in the vicinity. She was in a town called Holiday, which is just really a suburb of Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Just
Were you guys,
up on
all
the
of
mountain.
you were born and raised in Utah. So that's where the whole family's originally from.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. My siblings and I were somewhat scattered now, but at that time we were all living in Utah. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, all of us. So
I have a
and
question.
mhm.
When you obviously you said that she was like brutally beaten, and they talk about like that all like 24 of her ribs were broken, and like that's like overkill.
It is.
You know what I mean?
Her skull was shattered. They stomped on her chest so that your breastplate over your heart was shattered. They didn't mention, which you can read in the autopsy, is that also her knee was broken, her foot was broken, her toes were broken, her hand, her finger was broken, her arm, a shoulder. Brutal, just really brutal.
So she was basically shattered. I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Shattered. Yes. Yeah.
How did
lots of blood?
Probably isn't the time to ask, but how did he get in that? Like, what was their intention? Did she know them? Did she were they there just to? I don't understand. How did they?
Yeah, and that was really part of the mystery of everything for the 23 years that it did go unsolved, because they mentioned that when, or I guess, I don't know if it's unknown, but the detectives stated that when they found her with a pillow over her head, that most often that is a murder, and that someone couldn't bear to look at what they had done. And so it was a personal thing where they would have known her.
Right.
He did not know her. What we learned from when he testified at the trial, what we learned was she had taken her car in to a repair shop to get it fixed. Some of the TV programs say it was that day. It was actually the day prior to her murder. And he had worked at the car repair shop, and he had given her a ride back to her home. He stated when he drove her home, he recognized that she was probably well off, maybe had some jewelry, some things like that. And he made conversation with her, learned that she lived alone, knew that her husband had passed. And so he was really aware. So he was a drug addict.
I was going to ask that.
Really, hard use of drugs. He had been in and out of the juvenile system his whole life, I think. I mean, his wife would have been 16 when she was pregnant with their 5-year-old at that time, who was so. I know that they ended up having 4 kids, but she was from India, and I know that they've talked a little bit about how that the customs in India and things like that, how they are supposed to be very obedient to the man, and marriage is for life and no matter what, so I don't know if that's how she kind of downplays her role in the murders, but she does, and originally she denied being there, and then when he testified in court, he put her there as well. So,
Wow.
Yeah, so she's actually up for parole this year.
Interesting.
How do you feel about that? Is that something that you're going to attend or write a letter, or what's
Yeah, I would not like to see her get out at all. No, especially the way that they downplay, or she downplays her involvement or her. Yeah.
What was her charge? What is she in prison for?
She's in prison for murder.
Oh, she is. Okay.
Yeah, and she got like something to life, but she's up for parole this year. So, there was a murder following my grandmother's murder where they were serving. So,
when they solved the case for your grandmother, he was already in prison for murder, correct?
Yes, and he was on death row. Yeah. So
wow. When he was approached by detectives, did he since he was already on death row, was he forward with the information, or did it take a while to pull the information out of him?
It took a while. He wasn't going to bring forth anything on his own. They had to ask some roundabout questions, place him in Utah at the time, and then go from there. And then they gave him the DNA and told him, and then he came forward and pretty much, just stated kind of what happened. Really no emotion, just kind of nonchalant. He has 4 children, and all of those children have been in the system. All of those children have had, are currently locked up or have been. And his statement when someone mentioned that to him, because they had been, he had taken his children to all of his crimes. So they were used as pawns, really, is what they were.
They never stood a chance, really.
They didn't. But his statement was, none of my crimes or the murders had anything to do with what they did. So, yeah. So he doesn't even really,
he's like disconnected from it. He doesn't see how his role played in the shaping of the future of his children.
It's like a full lack of accountability.
Just totally disconnect from it.
Yeah. And her murder was in 1991. And when he was caught in Arizona in 1998. So I imagine, and I haven't heard anything, if anything's come forward, but I can't really, knowing that he didn't really change his drug habits or his lifestyle in between 91 and 98. I wonder how many others that he just has not.
That's what I was just wondering, if there were more.
Can
I ask? Oh, good. Do you? I want to know what your thoughts and your family's thoughts are on the death penalty. What are your thoughts about the death penalty?
Oh, that's a good question. And it's interesting with this case as well. Like my mother, of course, has so much trauma from this and PTSD. Her 2 siblings they came forward in the trial, and they told John Sansing, who was the murderer, they told him that they were able to forgive him, or that they forgave him.
Oof.
My mother was like, hell no, fuck you, and I will never forgive you. So I know there is, is different, and my mom just can't even wrap her head around the idea of forgiveness.
And her perception's a little bit different because she's actually the one who found her mother. So it's that personal piece to it where she actually walked in and saw the damage that was done.
Right. Yeah.
So
her brother was actually driving home back to Salt Lake, and he actually heard it on the radio. They gave him an address. He realized that was his address, his mother's address. So
oh my God.
Yeah.
Is that the one that was on the crime scene episode? Yeah. Because he like brought me to tears when they were interviewing him, and he when he was saying that his form of closure is forgiveness, and that he's forgiven him pretty much. And I thought, we've done like true crime cases before where there have been people that have stood up at trial and said like, I forgive you, and I just don't.
I don't think I ever could.
I don't think so.
Nope.
I just don't know how that's.
Wow.
Everybody grieves differently, but
they always say that forgiveness is more for yourself than for the person, though, because it's actually like for
a weight
you
off
to
of you.
relieve it. Yeah. So it's like, so I don't know if it's
Right.
It's hard though. That's a tough one though.
I don't think I'd be able to.
I also wanted to ask about you mentioned that your mom has PTSD, and obviously it changed her life forever.
Forever.
One of my best friends is a child of a murdered mother, and I've seen how it's affected his life forever. Has your mom, has she gotten therapy? Have things gotten better for her? Like how does she deal with it all these years later? And how is she now?
Right. I think it's affected her health. The more that she talks, when you can talk about something, it took me years before I could talk about the murder and not cry, and being able to talk about it as much as she does is healing. So the more that she's able to talk about it without, sobbing through everything, you can see that she has done a lot of healing therapy. She did a lot of EMDR. But she really struggled with therapy because she said she would get in there and she would cry, and she'd cry for 45 minutes and then she would leave. And so she ended up not really doing a lot of therapy. But I do think it really helped with the fact that our family openly talked about it for years and years and years and years and years. And just the things that would come up still, and the things that would, with the different investigations, the investigation was actually closed about a year and a half after they opened it. And then they reopened it again in like 2006, where it was open for another year and a half. And then they closed it again, and then they reopened it again. So
why did they close it after a year and a half after?
Just a dead end. DNA wasn't a thing back then. Mm-hmm. They did find some really interesting clues. If we go back to that morning when my mom came in, or when they found her, they did do a good job of closing off the crime scene and not letting it be, in any way, disturbed, or whatever word you use for that. Yeah. But because she was really the only one that had been in the home before they found her. So my grandmother, but they did notice that the dogs, my grandmother had 2 poodles, and those dogs, my grandmother was very, very, she was amazing. She was amazing. But she was also very structured. So the dogs came in at 7:15, the dogs ate at 7:30. Everything was in its place. Everything had a place. Everything was in the cupboards. Everything was labeled. Everything was just, on a schedule. So the fact that the dogs were still outside, and they would have come in at 7:30. There were dishes. There were things on the stove. And then there were these toys in the family room, and all of that was a little off. What we found out after was that after they murdered my grandmother, and this is why I assumed that the pillow was on her face, was because they sat down, they went through the fridge and the cupboards, took food, they sat down and cooked a meal and ate.
Oh man! Oh my God!
So he was a true a sociopath, just no empathy, no nothing.
Right. And they knew they had so much time, because the detectives said they actually opened drawers and flipped through clothing articles and put them and pushed it back in. They found blood traces on, so they went through just about everything. So
wow.
Yeah.
Where did the toys come from? Are they from you?
So what they found out was, because it was just so odd. My mom had stepped on a few and thought that was weird, just because my grandmother would not. She would, of course, bring out toys for grandkids and things like that, but she wouldn't have left anything out like that. And definitely not overnight. Definitely not on the front, outside or anything like that. So. It was just odd that they were there. And so what they realized was maybe someone left in a hurry and was dragging somebody out, and the toys went down the stairs, but they didn't actually leave in a hurry. They took their sweet time. So yeah.
So were those their toys, or were those toys that your grandmother had at her home for her grandchildren?
They were my grandmother's toys. And so what he said was, it had been a day. It was a day later. Sometimes the things will say that it was that day, but it was the next day. And he had gone home. It was planned. He knew what he was going to do. He knew how it was. I don't know that the murder was planned, but the robbery was planned.
Right.
So he went to my grandmother's home, knocked on her door, and what he said in court was that he asked her, he said, I'm just here to check on you to see how your car is driving, if everything's working well with the car. And I guess he said he pointed to his car and said his wife and his children were there. Did she want to meet them? And she said, yeah, bring him in. Yeah, I'd love to meet him. So he brought his wife, his 5-year-old son, and his baby into the home. And he asked if he could use the restroom. My grandmother was sitting in the family room with the wife and the 2 kids. And that's when she pulled out the toys and they were playing with Legos while my grandmother was visiting with his wife. So,
wow.
Yeah. And what he said was he asked to use the bathroom and then he went down the hall and had gone into the rooms, had gone into actually the master bedroom, I believe. And she saw him coming out of the room when she had gotten up to go to the kitchen to get a snack or a treat or something, he said, for the kids. So she saw him and she was a feisty little thing. She was ornery too. She was really ornery and feisty. And I can just see that she probably really went at him. I imagine she was like, what do you think you're doing? She was feisty. So I'm sure she didn't hesitate to lay into him, like, ask him what he was doing and why he thought that was okay. So what he said was when she confronted him, he says he panicked. And he also denies that he beat her as much as he did. But he stated, and this is, again, it's just what he said. He said that his wife is the one that picked up the crystal vase that was in the front entryway and hit her over the head and to knock her out. And they did find the wall was kicked in back behind by her head. Her head had also been stomped on. And they said that the chest print was a men's hiking boot, but the wall that had been kicked in was a women's Nike shoe size 8.
Wow.
Oh.
So they had thought that possibly it was 2 people. And it did look like maybe simultaneous blows because both sides,
Jeez.
And
she's up for
her cheekbone was broken, her nose was broken. Gosh, everything was broken. So, but she says that he didn't and has denied any involvement at all. So, she even said she wasn't there at first, but it places her there.
With something
they also,
oh, please.
I was going to say they also found like a diaper in the dirty laundry hamper in the bathroom. So they had gone in and changed the baby.
Oh my gosh.
Just weird because it sounds like his defense is that, or not defense, his explanation is that it was a botched robbery, but with something so incredibly violent and so like rageful, it feels like that was his intention no matter what, in my opinion. I don't know any better, but that reaction just seems so over the top as just being, startled in a robbery sort of thing. It sounds like I feel like his intent was probably bad when he went
100%.
there.
Right.
Yeah, because they had said, I had seen on the thing that they said that the only thing he really admitted to was he put her in a bear hug, I think they said.
That's what he said, yeah.
That he came up behind her and like hugged her and then hit her twice.
Yeah. He said he only struck her twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not going to cause those injuries. That's insane.
And that's why my mom said if you'd like to see the autopsy is horrendous. And it's everything that he said is it's not just twice that he hit her. He continued to over and over and over and over long after she had passed. So
in the episode that we watched, what's Scene of the Crime?
Scene of the Crime.
In it alluded to the fact that the family for a while thought that it may have been one of her nephews that could have possibly done it.
Right. That caused a lot of problems. That's
what I wanted to ask was that relationship with him and everybody, was that able to be patched up? Where are things with him now? And how did that must have been a very strange time.
It was. My mom, after she had that conversation with him and he had mentioned that there were things in the home that were his and he was cold, he was disconnected. They don't mention, but he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. He had been financially dependent on my grandmother for many years. I would say probably 10 years or more. She paid his house. She had paid his utilities and things. She had taken care of him. And the week prior to his passing, she had spoken with some of the family about how she didn't think he was going to make any effort to do it on his own as long as she did it for him. And she was going to have a talk with him. And she was worried about that because about 6 years prior to that, with the relationship with him, he had been angry and pulled a knife on her.
Oh my God.
So the family was, they were thinking, well, wow, and then just his reaction with the murder where he worked closely with her on genealogy. They did a lot of genealogy together. They spent a lot of time together. So, but no, that is not, that has not, that's really separated the family and hasn't healed. No.
Sorry to hear that.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
people were so certain that he did it, and were some of the, you're just.
I mean, I don't blame you guys for having that feeling. I mean, with schizophrenia and the fact that they were so close, and then his cold reaction. I can see how it would happen. It's just unfortunate that the way it ended up.
Yeah.
And whose son is he? Is he the sister's son or the brother's son?
He is my grandmother's brother's son.
Your grandmother's brother's son. Okay, got it. Okay.
So he would have been my grandmother's nephew and my mother's cousin.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
And this, how long was this a cold case for before it was solved?
23 years.
So can you tell us how you found out that there was a match for him, and where, like, what that feeling was like for the family, and just your experience finding out that there was a match on the DNA?
Yes. Yeah. It was, well, interesting enough, the detectives that worked on the case, my mother kept in contact with all of them over the years. When they would say that the case was cold, she was disappointed. She was still trying. I think when you don't know, you're always looking for answers, and you're always watching. My mother was certain that they would be after her, and she changed all the locks. She changed every single window and in the home for security. She put in security. She just has, okay, sorry. What was your exact question? I know I went off.
The question was, how did you find out that there was a match for the DNA, and what was that like for the family to finally have a name to put towards the person that did this to you guys?
Right. It was a shock too, because for so long we had been told that it had to be someone that knew her. There was no forced entry, the pillow on the head, the overkill, the rage. It had to be personal, all of those things. And then to find out that it was just a complete stranger that just by chance she met the day before, was shocking, really. But how they solved it was, just because wonderfully DNA, they reopened it in 2013. And then I think they solved it in 2014. So, was it 2014 that would have been. So it had been cold case for 23 years. So, but they had the DNA still that they were able to run. So I guess Utah got a bunch of money and they reopened. I think they chose like 6 cases, and they let us know that my grandmother's was going to be one. So we knew it was going to be reopened. And we had all, over the years, I know my sisters had we had all talked to the detectives about different things and that we may have thought, or any clues at all that we had or that we could give as far as our memory of people in and out of the home and things like that. So, but they said that my grandmother gave fought. They said she put up a good fight. So they had all of her nail clippings. They had DNA under her nails. They were able to run that DNA, and that DNA did hit with John Sansing. However, because she had been at the car shop and had been there with him, it didn't place him at the scene of the crime.
Oh.
So even though it was they say, oh, in order to absolutely know, they had to put him at the scene of the crime. And so just by chance, they thought, well, let's check these Legos. So they ran the Legos. They were able to get off of that. They got a print. That fingerprint hit a match for John Sansing's son, who was in prison in Arizona as well.
Wow. Oh, that's right.
And,
I didn't put that together by watching the show. That's fascinating because fingerprints don't change.
Right.
Yeah.
no, they don't. And he was 5 years old at the time.
Wow.
And his sister would have been a baby. So there was a baby and a 5-year-old, and then the mother. And then, and so the four of them were in the home at the time of the murder. So, but that put him there. So they contacted him, and he said, yes, I remember I was there. And so that put him, and with him being there, that put his father in, and that's how they were able to, so they really were able to close the case because of Legos. A print on a Lego 23 years later.
Wow.
Yeah. Which
That's
is
amazing.
really, yeah, it is. It is. And, it was interesting to me too, that they couldn't do, they had his DNA. So, yeah.
I have a question. In the show, the crime scene show, they had mentioned that your grandmother's house was torn down, that house is no longer there. They rebuilt it. How long after the murders was that done?
That was done, I'm going to say, I think a while after. I think it had been 15 to 20, in between 15, 18 years after.
Oh. Okay. And is that house like still in your family, or was it just?
It is not.
It is not. Okay.
Yeah. The house was in the family for quite a while. Just the time it took to, just to be comfortable going in the home, or
I can't imagine.
I don't think it was ever a thing to be, comfort is the right word, but being able to go into the home. It was vacant for probably 5 years or so, just before they were able to clean things out, go in and get things and do things. And people would go in on and off. My mother never did go back.
Is it true? Because I have heard, and I don't know, let me know if this is, but after a crime scene, is it the family's responsibility to clean the house, or do they bring in people to clean the house? I don't know if that's not very tasteful for me to ask. I'm sorry, but I just always wondered about that trauma.
I've interviewed a crime scene cleaner before.
Oh, but
There are services.
But is it the responsibility of the family, or is it something that the police or take care of? Is it
right?
Public.
In this situation, they went in and because they had dusted everything, there was the chalk or the black everywhere, all over the home. They had torn things apart. They had pulled out drawers. They had made such the state did take care of that. They brought in some crime scene cleaners. They went in, cleaned everything, put it back to as good as they could, but they had to cut out pieces of the wall. And none of that was replaced or repaired. Anything that they had taken or broken or needed, carpet samples, things like that, they just leave it. Yeah. So you have the blood-stained wood, and it's the responsibility of the family to put down, new carpet or new padding or all of that. And then there's the difficulty in selling the home after such.
Yeah. Isn't it 3 years though? After 3 years, you don't have to disclose that there was a murder.
Utah might be different.
Oh, maybe Utah. Yeah. In California, I think it's 3 years that you have to disclose. Yeah. After 3 years, you don't have to.
It didn't happen after 3 years.
Yeah. Forget about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I was just wondering when I asked about the house, I was just wondering if the reason for the house being torn down was because of the history of the murder and the history of the home, or if it was just to
normal real estate stuff.
Yeah. Well, the home sat on some proper, a pretty good piece of property, and it was sat kind of front. I don't know, if that was the reason, but I do know the home was built in the 50s. So I wouldn't imagine that it was torn down because of age. Because 50s isn't too,
right.
And they had a pool. I know they filled the pool with dirt. I think that it was just it was a really violent crime, and they did disclose to the people that bought the home, and they sold it for pennies, is from what I understand. So
Wow.
yeah, the family just really, they got together and decided, let's just get rid of it, I guess. So,
I mean, the historical name for the case is obviously the Lego murders, which is a very catchy kind of name. I was curious if you guys had ever been approached by any true crime collectors looking for memorabilia or stuff like that, because it's a very big part of this subculture, I guess. The true crime culture is people want like a piece of the story. Have you guys had to deal with any of that?
I personally have not. They did have a lot of evidence, and they kept that evidence. And as far as I know, they preserved the evidence really well. I do know some things were missing, which is weird as well. Like the diaper was gone, which maybe they had a sample, but I do know that some of the evidence was missing. I do know that my mother personally has never had any of the evidence. So if someone had approached her to buy something, or me, I haven't really had anything other than just personal items from the home or keepsakes. Yeah. So, but they did clean out the home, and they did sell off a lot of things. So, or people did come and approach them for things, but I don't know if it was related. Yeah. Interesting. That's a question for my mother. That's a good question. Yeah.
It's amazing the kind of stuff that finds its way out of a crime scene or out of an evidence locker sometimes.
Yeah.
When certain amount of money is presented to somebody.
Right.
It's crazy.
I have a question, and I know but have you ever had a dream about your grandmother? Has she come to you in your dreams or anything, or your mom? Like,
yeah, that is so interesting that you asked that, because I have, and actually I'm the only one in the family that I know of that has.
Wow.
So, after my grandmother died, we were all really, really shaken and very, very scared. And when the media gets a hold of it, there was, I was just a granddaughter, and the media was there, and the media was at the funeral, and they got in the way, and they were intrusive. And, there was media outside my mother's home, just the media. It was a little tricky, but I was really, really struggling with sleep. So I was having nightmares, really extreme nightmares every night. And I would sit up, just gasp in bed, and just be shaking and sobbing. And that happened for several weeks. And I would be in the car. I'd call my husband to walk me in to the home, or to work. I'd have people walk me in and walk me out. And then one night I sat up in bed and just did the same thing that I had done every night. And I sat up, and my husband was like, "Are you okay?" I said, "Oh my word. Wow, I just had the most beautiful dream." And sure enough, yeah. Because I sat there, he asked about it, and I took the time to tell him about it. I was really pleased that he did that, because I'm able to remember the dream because I sat down and shared it with him at that time. So, but yeah, in my dream, my grandmother did come to me. She was, showing me around this beautiful paradise, if you want to say, just green as the greenest green I can imagine. But we were walking around, and she was talking, and she was introducing me to people, and people that I don't know, but just, you've got to meet this person, you've got to meet this person, you've got to meet this person. And so partially, through meeting all these people, she said, "Oh my goodness, it's time for you to go, but you have to one more person." And so
they're gonna. You're gonna keep going. Keep going, because I have
share.
Yeah, well, I'll share with you. This is crazy.
So she brought me to this person, and she said, "This is Melanie." And he said, "Melanie." He just hugged me, and it was just this beautiful embrace. And he held my hand, and he was so excited to meet me. And then we left, and we walked out, and that's when I remembered, because she said it was time for me to go. And then I remembered, and I said, "Oh, but Grandma, you," and I didn't say, I just said, like, you. And she said, "Oh, honey," and she pulled her hair up, because we we had seen her, and the family was able to see her in the casket, and didn't look like her at all. And, the shape and the broken nose and cheek. And anyway, but she lifted up her hairline and she said, look, it's perfect. I'm perfect. I'm not, there's no pain. I'm healed, and it's perfect. I'm okay. And I remember just childlike innocence saying, oh, good. I'm glad you're okay, kind of thing. But I was just relieved that she wasn't in pain, because I remembered that. And so then, I remember she walked me, and I turned around and said, oh, aren't you coming? Aren't you coming? And she said, sweetheart, it's far too beautiful here. And she said, I love you. And that's when I woke up. And it was interesting, because when I told that story to my mother and others, I don't use the word far too beautiful or far this, but apparently I didn't know this at the time, that's why my mother was just so certain. It was because my grandmother used that word.
Wow.
She would say, oh, I'm far too tired. I better get home, or it's far too late, or, and I didn't, remember that or know that. So
that sounds so incredibly comforting.
Well, however, I missed the biggest part was when I turned around and said all this to her, when I had the memory, I said, who did this to you? Who did this to you? And her answer was, oh, sweetheart, it doesn't matter.
Wow.
Chills.
We gasped because we both, I lost my husband and she lost her. Was it my dad? Yeah, your dad. But I had the same dream. And in the dream, he came to me, but he had a weird watch on, and he goes, I only have a certain amount of time. And he was beautiful, and he was beautiful. And it was just like pristine and crisp, and the colors were bright. And then he went around and he said, I'll be right back. Same thing.
Wow.
So cool.
That gave me goosebumps. I
have goosebumps too.
Wow. I almost knew she was going to say it. That's why I kept looking at you to see, because she had told her story. And then I had the same dream of my dad shortly after he died. And he told me the same thing when I was trying to walk towards him to talk to him. He pointed at his watch and he said, I have to go now.
Yeah, that's
and then
so
he
weird.
Disappeared. And so when you were in the middle of your story,
we both like gasped. We're like, oh yeah.
I almost knew what you were going to say before you said it.
Wow. That's amazing.
It really is. And because it was time to go. It was time to go. It was told. She said that several times. That's really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, my husband passed away like 5 years ago, but I have not had any dreams with him. So maybe you could send that my way. I would.
I will.
Absolutely.
While we're having a positive moment with the dream, I had a question for the end, but I want to ask it now. A lot of these times with these kind of sort of sensational stories, people focus on the horrible part. I wanted to ask you to describe some of your fondest memories of her, or what, like when you think of her, how do you think about her? What do you think about?
Oh my gosh, she was so amazing. My grandmother was, without a doubt, the reason that I was able to do so many wonderful things and to have so many wonderful experiences, just in growing up. I was in a performing group, and we were going to Russia and Romania and Bulgaria, and my mother would say, ask your grandmother. My grandmother paid for piano lessons, and my grandmother took me places and took us on vacations, and we were really close with my grandmother. Spent a lot of time. She was so supportive. Right before she passed, it was probably about a year, because I wasn't married yet, and she died shortly after I was married. But I was staying at her home. And again, this is college, so this is before the internet and all those wonderful things. But I was working on a paper and doing some research. So I had a lot of papers, and I had a lot of books and a lot of things. And just one of my fondest memories is my grandmother stayed up the entire evening looking for good quotes for my paper, highlighting things, bringing things to me and saying, what about this? What about this? What do you think about this? and it's so supportive and so giving and so loving and so selfless, just really selfless. But she was a gardener. She was outside all the time. She had a pool. She was, she'd get up and do her 100 laps every morning at 5 a.m. She was just really an inspiration. She
stronger than me, that's for sure.
I think that she really encouraged all of us in the family as far as education and things like that. She had an art degree, so she was creative and artistic, and but I think more than anything, she just took, when she was with me, all of her time, all of her attention, and I just felt that. I felt that, and she was pretty in tune with what's wrong. Are you okay? Are you stressed? How can I help you? Kind of thing. So, I think we all had different relationships with our grandmother. We all knew that she was feisty and ornery as well. Yeah, she was with my grandfather anyway. My grandfather was the rule breaker, and my grandmother was definitely the.
Someone has to have the different roles, of course.
That's absolutely. And when I had that dream, my mother said that dream was very healing for her, but she was very worried because my grandfather was not in my dream. My mom keeps thinking that maybe he didn't make it to heaven.
Oh
no! He was in the den doing crossword puzzles. It's fine.
Yeah, we don't know where Grandpa is.
He's in the garage tinkering. Yeah,
that's funny.
So basically, the reason why you're here is that we had a conversation about people that are close to a horrible event like this. We were curious if those people have an interest or an aversion to true crime type things. So where are you at with these kind of stories or true crime in general? And if you can speak for anyone else in your family, I'm curious how you guys feel about that.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because we'll get together and we do family things and family vacations and things like that. And we'll watch shows or talk about shows. And I'm always very careful with my mother, and just checking in if we're watching something that's violent on a movie or seeing something like that. And just knowing the situation. And my mother, I guess depending on if there's triggers or things, we'll get emotional at times. But we are all, every one of us, I have 4 siblings and my mother and my father, and we are all very, very interested in true crime and just how it works and what's going on. And did you hear this? And, with the Idaho murders that are going on right now. And I'm
obsessed.
Me too. I know. Each night at work, I'm thinking, I'm sure I'm going to solve these. I'm going to do it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But my sisters and I, we have conversations like that. We like to go to, I like to do the whenever you can do a haunting tour or the city that you're in or in San Antonio, the ghost kind of things. But we do, I think, talk a lot about the psychology behind
interesting
behind the murders and the people that commit the murders or the crimes and where were they, what was going on in their lives, where that type of thing. But the psychology, I think, is where we my family and I probably center the most or connect the most with talking about that, rather than maybe like the horrific or the details of the crimes.
Details,
right. Yeah. Because my mom we can all be kind of sensitive to that sometimes, or at times, but for the most part, I think as time goes by, the more and more comfortable and interested we are. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Have any of you had the opportunity to comfort other people who have gone through this through any kind of support groups, or have you guys had the ability to do that at all?
My mother has. She's been asked to speak at several things, or to and just kind of how you get through things, or how you even approach the idea of moving forward or healing, because everything stops. Life is just not the same. And especially when it's an unsolved crime and you've got 23 years and the scenarios, the things that we've talked about, my sisters and I have said, oh, it's got to be this person. And then we've done our own research and we've tried to do our own, find information, and we've called the detectives and things like that. But as far as helping out the community, we have been a part of, my mother and I were part of a group where we were more participants, I guess, but we did share and talk, and we were there essentially as, I don't want to say as, I've got the word, let's see, as
kind of like
we were the everyone knew. Everyone knew, and they were there, and we talked about it and how to get through. But they were going through this same thing. So, and it was set up through Salt Lake, through the detectives. There was several families that were there. I think my mother said it best when she just said time. You know, she said if she could give anyone that was going through what she did or what we have gone through, really the only thing that you can do is time. And it's just, that's it. Just moment to moment, breath to breath, you 2 steps forward, 10 steps back. But just time. Yeah.
Because that's not even like just dealing with a death, you know, that's not mourning and grieving. That's fear too, on top of all that, having to deal with that. So I think that's, you know, so much harder to deal with when you're in fear of not knowing who did this. Are they going to come for me and the rest of my family? Especially thinking like this was somebody that we knew, you know?
Right. Yes. And for years and years, I think that was a huge, huge gift when they did solve the crime. And I think my mother has changed since then. Maybe not relax isn't the right word, but there's been a shift. Definitely
it's a little bit of an exhale, a little bit, right?
Right. Yep. Yes. You know, we don't understand. I know when you talk about the death penalty, my mom would say yes, for sure. But you know, knowing that it was a stranger, my mom felt targeted for so long. She thought for sure, you know, one of us, or we were all next, or, you know, if it was a personal thing, then they would come for the rest of us. So, it was a huge relief to find. But with the crime that he was on death row for, have you looked into that at all? Have you?
Yes. That's grueling.
Yeah. Horrific, isn't it?
Terrible. Terrible.
And I think with that one, like you were saying, that I think he did have the intention to kill her right all along as well. Yeah. Because from what the 4 kids have all testified, actually one of the 4 children reached out to my mother.
Wait, his 4 kids?
That was one of my last questions. If there's been any contact between you and his siblings or his children, I thought. Yep.
Yes, the sibling that was in jail who had the match. He's in life as well. I don't know what he's in for. He did reach out to my mother, and he said, you know, I was there. I remember, I have memories, and he put his mom there, which his mom had said she wasn't there. But he had talked about, you know, with my mother, he sent her, I think, several emails, and should share those with you. I'm sure she would, or I could get copies of those, talking about his life and the things that they saw and witnessed as kids, and it's just really, really tragic. But one of the children who is not, I think 3 of the 4 are still locked up and have been locked up for quite some time. I know that after the murder happened in Arizona, after they were arrested, that the state took the kids. The kids were the 4 children. I think they were 12 and maybe 8 or 9 or and anyway, there were 4 of them, and they were younger than that. And they placed them all in foster homes. And I know that they went to some different foster homes, and they all really, really struggled. They've all been in trouble with the law. They've all had drug issues. They've just, those kids just, the things
I wouldn't expect anything different, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, and they watched and they heard as their father raped and brutally murdered the woman in Arizona. So, and then they helped him drag her body out to the
because they were older, because that was 7 years later. So that one that was there was 5, so he was 12 years old.
Yes, and he remembers.
Imagine like being a 12-year-old doing that. Like,
at 12 you would remember.
I was playing in the dirt when I was 12.
Yeah.
You know. different
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Well, and he said that he listened and had nightmares for years with that woman begging and pleading
Oh,
for
I
her
can
life,
imagine.
and begging those children to let her go, because he ran for a drug. He went on a drug run in between when he had her tied up before he raped her and killed
And
her.
she was just delivering food from church to him, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure. But the one child who was not imprisoned at the time when we had the trial did contact my mother and ask if we would be willing to meet, to get together and to talk, and was looking for closure, was looking for forgiveness, was looking to heal. And it was actually a really nice, kind letter. And my mother was just not open to it. So, which is okay for her. Maybe someday, she says maybe someday, but for now, she has no interest at all.
Yeah, can't blame her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any last questions from you guys?
No, I don't think so.
I just want to close by asking, like, how are you? How are you now after all these years?
Yeah, I'm good. My grandmother's murder was really traumatic for me. The dream was wonderful. The loss of my husband a couple years ago was trauma, so re-traumatized. But I think that, wow, I think we're all stronger. I think you just, I'm okay. I'm okay. That's how I am. I'm okay. I definitely know that I am hypervigilant. I know that I check my windows, I check my doors, even all these years later, even knowing who did it and that it was, I know that I worry about my kids and their safety. I like, my children are all grown, they're adults, but I like to, know where they are, that they're safe.
Because the sad part knowing is that he's not the only one out there that's doing this. That's why there is a genre of this. That's why it's unfortunate.
It is. The biggest thing that happens is that you live in your little safe bubble, and then that bubble explodes, and you always think it happens to everyone else, not you. And then when it happens to you, you are all too aware. I am all too aware that it happens to me.
Yeah.
It happens to good people. She wasn't a horrible person. She was a wonderful person and had, didn't have anyone or enemies or people that wanted to hurt her. And it was just one of those. So yes, it happens. It happens to all of us. And it just is. Yeah. And, John Sansing, he's trying to get a book deal. He's trying to get several book deals.
God.
Wow.
I hope he doesn't. That and Kara Sansing, she has like a glass eye. Did you look her up by any chance?
I did. I actually researched a lot on her life, and she had a really terrible upbringing when she was in jail at 10 years old.
Yeah.
She was from Bangladesh, but that was their culture. Like, she grew up around a lot of violence, and so I think, when he would be violent towards her, that was just all she knew, I think.
Right. And that I have been really curious over the years with her.
Yeah.
Knowing her upbringing and how she felt and did she feel, but because she did participate. Yeah. And the child and John did say that she's the one that, hit my grandmother over the head with the crystal vase, which, crushed her skull. So I don't know. I wonder, I would really be interested in talking to her. I know she has a GoFundMe page out.
Oh, wow.
Trying to get out of jail. So, but she also has a glass eye. Did you notice that?
No.
And someone said that occurred in an accident that happened in around 1991. And I just have this, I don't know if it's because I want it to be so badly, but I just would love that my grandmother scratched her eye out.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Yes.
I suggest you go ahead and have that.
Yeah, go ahead and think that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Melanie, thank you so much for giving us your time.
Yes.
And it was really nice to learn more of the nicer parts of your grandmother as well. So thank you
thank you so much
for that. And we appreciate this very much.
Yes, so much.
Yeah, so nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
and
much.
all of our best to your family and everybody.
And your family.
Thank you. Yeah, and happy holidays. Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. All right.
Also, if you want anything else, just let me know if you want to speak with my mother or my sister.
I would love that.
Appreciate it very much.
Yeah. I'll definitely text you and we'll set something up for sure.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. All right. So nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you. Bye.
This is Lola, and I'm here to tell the world to stop being such pussies and listen to Rare Form Radio.